So we're going to start with Clare Murray, and she's the Executive Director of the Community Center of Northern Westchester.
Knowing you.
She started there as the Assistant Director in 2010. She became Executive Director in 2016. She's a native of England, which will immediately be apparent when you hear her wonderful voice. And where she earned a degree in physiotherapy. She worked as a physiotherapist in Great Britain and Canada for over 20 years as a clinician, manager, and clinical instructor at the University of Toronto. Upon moving to the United States and settling in Bedford Hills, she also managed a business in retail and wholesale clothing and importing business. She utilizes her skills in business and healthcare to enhance the quality of life of others. So this will be the beginning of a profile of 3 organizations that you might not know about or maybe have a sense of, who do a tremendous amount of work on the things that we are also interested in: housing, homeless housing, affordable housing, education, and job training. So please welcome, as our first speaker, Clare Murray.
Well, good evening, and thank you, Albert, for inviting me here. This is really quite a treat. I've already learned so much just from sitting next to Rose, and my world at the moment is dipping into the world of building and construction, so I wish I could come to all of your meetings. But to share a little bit about the Community Centre of Northern Westchester. We're a non-profit organisation residing in Katona and have been in operation for about 27 years. It was an organisation that was founded in Katona at a time in the mid-1990s when there was an economic downturn, and a few religious organizations got together to say, what can we do to meet the need? And the need at that time was a food pantry. So it began as a food pantry, it grew to be a food pantry and a clothing bank, and then it also added on, in its very early days, employment counselling, because so much of the hardship was about unemployment. So over the 27 years, the community centre has grown so that it not only serves Katona but serves the whole of Northern Westchester. We have about 2,000 families come to us for help every year. The largest number of families come from Ossining, Mount Kisco, and Bedford Hills. We're a trust-based organisation, so anyone who comes in our door and says they're cold or hungry, we believe them. We don't check financial records. We try and provide a service that will help to meet their needs immediately, and then looking to the future, how can we help them get back on their feet? So our mission is really to improve the well-being and self-sufficiency of our neighbours in need with food, clothing, skill development programs, and access to other resources. So whilst a family is coming either in a position of short-term distress with sudden misfortune or maybe longer-term needs, everybody is able to come to the food pantry once a month. We provide about 6 days worth of food per person in the family, so it's all dependent on the size of your family. So we're not feeding a family for the whole time. We say we're just taking the edge off of hunger. But sometimes that 1 week's worth of food makes a big difference between paycheck to paycheck, or when social security's run out or food stamps have run out. We're really there for people who have needs because of health issues, employment issues, whether it's unemployed or underemployed. Many of our families are working many jobs, but their hours are insufficient or their wages are insufficient. And we obviously are there for the long term, for those who have long-term needs, whether it's through sickness and health needs or mental illness, physical disabilities. There will be people who will be using the community centre forever, and we understand that. But for those who don't need to use us forever, our goal is, what can we do to help you not need to come to a food pantry? So whilst you're in need, we offer a range of services to help reduce your financial burden. So we offer, right now we have a prom program going on. So last year we had 99 high school kids come and get generously donated to us. Everything comes from the community and we're just the distributor back to the community. but 99 high schools, girls and boys, with tuxedos and gorgeous dresses and shoes and pocketbooks and jewellery, able to attend their prom in style without having to face that burden of cost. During the summer, we send 65 children to free sleepaway camps in Maine and New Hampshire, often the first time that they've been away from their families, and trying to put them on a level playing field with their peers in terms of experience. So again, we reach out to the community, we do drives, we ask for gently used sleeping bags and duffel bags and backpacks and rain jackets and rain boots, etc. Bug spray, sunscreen. So that comes toward the end of June. We roll into the summer asking for school supplies, and about 1,000 children get brand new school supplies before school year starts. Through the holidays, we give additional foods, frozen turkeys, coffee, tea, things that we wouldn't normally have in the pantry, and then pajamas for all the children over Christmas. So we're always trying to sort of lift in terms of providing and reducing burden of cost. But then we're also trying to help people get ahead. So we have job counsellors, help you with career planning, help you with resume writing, interview preparation, etc. Online applications, we teach basic computer skills, we teach basic construction skills, which I think was what Albert really got. So that's so interesting. So we have every winter, so we choose the winter because many of our folks are actually getting work during the summer months, but not during the winter months, and that's the time they can afford to take more educational opportunities. So we teach a 10-week program in the basic skills of construction, taught by an architect and an engineer. And it really is, to my understanding, really teaching about reading blueprints. And everybody is given their own sets of blueprints and their tube to hold their blueprints in, and their architect's rulers, and they learn about measurements and scale. So many who come to the program are already working in the industry, but they have not had that experience. So they're really grateful for getting more advanced knowledge and feel better positioned in their job. So our hope is that they will have increased opportunities for work, or better paying work, or more steady work. And the response has been, we've been teaching this for about 10 years now, has been fantastic. The participants really think it does a world of good. This year we're also offering an advanced construction skills course for those who've taken the basic class and who have passed the test that the instructor put to them, so that they can take the next level up. We also teach, we've had for quite a few years now, teach the OSHA safety for the construction industry. And every year we would teach the 10-hour where they would get their card. But by high demand, last year we bit the bullet and we taught the 30-hour, so they got their certification. And again, the classes, we can teach about 25 students at a time, given the space that we have and the instructors that we have. But one year, the waiting list for our construction class, we could take 25 and 90 individuals signed up to take it. So we ended up holding 2 classes that year. The OSHA, again, there's a sort of a wait list when people get teaching 25, but they want to come. So they're putting their name on the list now, even though the winter's a ways away. So it seems to be in high demand. It seems to be having good effect. And when I spoke with one of the gentlemen just recently, he shared with me that he just felt so much more confident in his job, that he had better understanding and was being turned to more often. So hopefully he will be recognized for being able to take on a little bit more responsibility. But he wants the advanced class because he wants to get an even better job. So that's exciting. With our, a lot of feedback from the women who've been coming to us are that the barriers for them often working outside of the home are lack of affordable childcare or lack of transportation. So we have been teaching now for a year a sewing and design program, which is really geared to helping gain the skills to set up your own home-based business. So as a clothing bank, we receive actually over 100 tons of clothing a year. It's not uncommon to receive 1,000 pounds of clothing a day, 1,000 pounds of clothing a day, which we get sorted, and what's seasonal and good condition goes here, and what's stained sheets goes to animal shelters, and what's too many men's business clothes go to the midnight run, what's too dramatic goes to the theatre companies. So we try not to waste anything. We're very environmentally conscious and thrifty and make sure that every donation goes to where we hope it will be utilised best. But we obviously have this massive resource in textiles coming in our back door. So it was a natural for us to be able to use that to help with the sewing and design programs. Of course, we shouted out to the community for need of gently used sewing machines, and now we have no space to store them because the world is providing sewing machines and fabric flowing out of the corners of our offices. But the women and men who are making working through this program have taken several layers. One is, again, basic, one is more advanced, skill development, but they're making their own products. They're getting taught by somebody how to market their products, and they're taught how to set up their own business and how to manage their money and how to pay taxes. So we're having great success, or they're having great success there, selling their wares at farmers markets, at holiday boutiques. Our hope is to evolve this program to the next level, where they'll actually be able to set up their own online Etsy store or other means of making an income from their own wares, which is fantastic. Interestingly, quite a few local businesses heard that we were doing the sewing program, have reached out to us and are now seeking people to employ to make. So the local yoga studio makes massage pillows and is reaching out because she needs somebody to help sew the pillows. And a high-end Thai company wanted help with their samples. And so we're not only getting these folks work from home, but we're also finding that they're getting sort of piecework to do for local employers. And this brings on a whole nother level that we're going to have to move to, which is how to help teach them to advocate for themselves, negotiate prices and fair wages and all the rest. So that's very exciting. I don't want to spend too long talking, but I really just wanted to say that if anyone, because I'm speaking to the audience I am, we're always interested if anyone has skills that they want to teach. We're always inviting the community at large to participate in any way they can. And we're always looking for networking opportunities for the folks who are turning to us looking for employment, if there are employment opportunities in the industry. So I'd be really happy afterwards if anyone wants to take my business card, or I can leave a contact number if you're interested in reaching out. We'd be delighted to hear from you. And if anyone is ever passing by a small house, it's a little house really on the side of the road, which is crazy that it can provide so much to so many out of such a small footprint. Please do stop by and come and say hello, because we'd be delighted to show you around. That's about it.
Great.
You know, actually, Claire gave me an idea, which there's a technical aspect to it, which, of course, that's where I stop with my idea, but I'll have to defer to my technical colleagues, Mike Dardano, Maggie Collins, and Jeff. Maybe we could have something, kind of a reciprocal link between our website and the three of yours for, you know, to exchange information, bulletin board information, help wanted, or position filled, or whatever. So I'll have to leave that to the technical people in my office. Next, I would like to call Maggie Collins up to introduce our next speaker, Rose Noonan.
Thank you for all that, Claire. It was really interesting to hear about it, really. So thank everyone for coming here tonight to our May General Membership Meeting. And I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Rose Noonan, who is the Executive Director of the Housing Action Council. And many of you probably know Rose or know her work, but let me give you the story. So Rose is the Executive Director of the Housing Action Council, a not-for-profit organization located in Tarrytown. She began her housing career as Director of the National Leased Housing Association, the leading trade association for government-assisted rental housing in Washington, D.C. Rose has advised state and local housing officials on designing and implementing affordable housing programs and designing and implementing affordable housing programs and plans. She managed the Yonkers Affordable Housing Office, which was responsible for implementing a housing desegregation order, which I'm sure everyone here remembers. She has also advised many municipalities, civic groups, religious groups, and community organizations on roles in housing development and assisted them through the development process. She affirmatively markets many of the affordable housing developments in Westchester County, and her services are primarily focused in the Hudson Valley region. And she attended Trinity College in Washington, D.C., received her advanced degree in government from Georgetown University, and is a graduate of Elizabeth Howe School of Law at Pace University. So welcome, Rose.
All right. Good evening, everyone. And Claire, you are a hard act to follow. So let me try to tell you a little bit about Housing Action Council. And I look at the theme of tonight's dinner that we were asked to participate in, just making the difference on social, economic, and community improvement. I'm saying, okay, look at my years at Housing Action Council, the activities of Housing Action Council, and how can I address those most important but also very complex and critical issues. So I needed to go back and look at the history of Housing Action Council. And contrary to what many people think, I was not there at its beginning. So I come with some history from others, particularly John Nolan, who was Housing Action Council's first executive director. And he informed me that the Housing Action Council got its start from a group of businesses in Westchester called Westchester Coalition. The organization doesn't exist anymore, but those businesses came together year after year is to look at what is critical issues in Westchester and how might they be addressed. And out of that came, no surprise, housing was a problem back in the 1970s. Housing is even a more critical problem today. But the coalition, Westchester Coalition businesses, seed-funded Housing Action Council and hired its first executive director. And was given a very broad charge. What could we do in Westchester to improve the housing situation? And where Housing Action Council initially started was taking a look at the county government. What powers or lack of powers or whatever is at the county level that could be brought to bear to develop and improve housing situations. And right at that time, Federal Act came, 1974, Housing and Community Development Act, federal level. And it enabled the communities in Westchester, the smaller communities, towns and villages, to band together, form the Urban County Consortium, and access, for many years, millions and millions of dollars that not only supported the development of housing, but also other community improvement activities. I was telling Claire that program, which still exists today, is her center, which is trying to expand, try to improve, would be an eligible activity for these community development block grants that come to the county and come locally. But what Housing Action Council did at that time was actually the instigator of having the communities come together for the purpose of getting that funding. It also looked at the Department of Social Services, and there's a state law still in effect, doesn't have as much impact as it did in those days, called the Spiegel Act. And what it gave the Department of Social Services the ability to withhold rents paid on behalf of public assistance clients without any retaliatory action taken by the landlord for non-payment of rent. But then use both that stick and the carrot of funding in order to improve properties, and used also local code enforcement efforts. Housing Action Council, prior to my time, started that program. They also looked at housing needs, something the county is doing today, and we expect a housing needs report, affordable housing needs report, to be issued either the end of May or the end of June, or at some time in the near future. The council took a different way of looking at housing needs at that point. They looked at it locally, given our 43 municipalities, and really asked the municipalities to establish what the need was and how they would address those needs. And at that point in time, it was an effective leverage. Next thing comes is the homeless problem, really, and that's in more in the 1990s and so forth. Housing Action Council created Westhab, which some of you may be familiar with. It was a program of Housing Action Council. At a point in time, it was a decision made that program should be spun off as a separate organization. It has become the major not-for-profit provider of housing and social services along with Alex's group, Community Housing Innovations, in the county. But at this point, Westhab is really expanding into New York City. So they're becoming larger and larger and more effective. It started with our office. We also evaluated the legal authority that the county has in the housing area. Eventually, that led to the county's today's Housing Capital Program, which provides money, substantial amounts of money, for acquisition and public infrastructure associated with the development of affordable housing. And during those years, and now I'm up to the early 2000s, I am involved as a staff person, but we went national, which I think few people realize. Monies were flowing from the federal government, which we don't see today. And we worked in the areas, and we were in Shreveport, which I didn't even know where it was at that time, in Louisiana, New Bedford, Mass, in Ohio, in California, providing technical assistance to communities, particularly municipalities, to design housing programs. What that brought back here was other practices and expertise that I think Housing Action Council has benefited many in this area in working on that. These think tanks and programs designs are critical, but program delivery makes the difference. Today we provide technical assistance to nonprofits located in the Mid-Hudson Valley. We help them we provide what I say is the staff infrastructure for a small community organization to address housing problems in their community. And so what that means differ from community to community. Sometimes we feel like we are the small developer doing it all. In other cases, we are bringing in the technical expertise to pull together the funding that makes affordable housing happen. Albert asked me just to touch briefly on SHORE. SHORE is one of those organizations. Sheltering the homeless is our responsibility. And had the good fortune of recognizing the work of BRI and Albert at its last annual dinner, which was last July 2018. But it is an all-volunteer organization that is trying to do its best to provide permanent housing for homeless families at a truly affordable rent. Let me say truly affordable, because some of our affordable developments are not as affordable as others might want them to be. And so Housing Action Council is not only their back office support, but we are the organization that has helped them develop about 30 properties throughout southern Westchester to provide affordable housing at very low rents, usually in 2-3 family homes. We also collaborate quite frequently with the Land Use Law Center at PACE to conduct training for municipal officials, practitioners. Some of the people in this room have participated in that training, and we're going to be offering it again in the fall of this year. Housing Action Council is the sponsor of many of the affordable housing developments that are built by for-profit developers in this county and beyond this county. We bring, in some cases, the expertise. In other cases, we're bringing our nonprofit status that brings value to a development because of our sales tax exemption, our mortgage tax exemption, and our knowledge of the community. And I think the respect of many of the municipal officials. We also have a collaboration called the New York Mortgage Coalition, where there are 10 to 12 banks that are involved in providing support to us and others in the metropolitan area to provide home ownership counseling. The thinking behind that program is if you have a prepared person interested in home ownership, they are going to be able to be a good homeowner in terms of paying mortgages, budgeting, and so forth. And it was also particularly to work with the minority populations, and also including immigrants who do not have a history of home ownership in their background. And the process, as some of you know, is extremely complex. So we have that type of program within our office, and a very comprehensive home ownership counseling program. As was mentioned, we have been involved in several desegregation orders, not only Yonkers, where we do pat ourselves on the back and feel that we implemented the order. We were not involved in all the controversy that went on before the city settled. We have also, for the past 7-8 years now, have been working extremely closely with the County of Westchester and municipalities that are impacted by that desegregation order, and to have them comply with the order, and have I think the compliance with the order is 99% there. A lot of good things, a lot of not so good things associated with that. We do the affirmative marketing because that's a requirement that the county's desegregation order requires. So anything that's funded by Westchester County, many of the municipalities at this point also do affirmative marketing, meaning that we reach out when there's affordable housing units available to a 9-county area, and selection is by lottery, that there aren't preferences, so that everyone has an equal chance. We also relocate families. We're currently working in the White Plains. We're working with the YMCA in White Plains that is in the process of being sold. There are 165 individuals there who pay between $600 and $900 a month in rent. Anybody have any apartments that I can find to help rent, or rooms? What I'm finding out is that rooms in White Plains are going for about $1,000. So I have a tough job, and I've got to say that I will say most of those individuals, which are both men and women, will probably be relocating out of the county. Have we made an impact? Sometimes I think we have not. But we have facilitated, laid claim to about 5,000 units of housing over our history. Much more needs to be done. I think we must really together figure out ways to dramatically increase the supply of housing, including affordable housing in this county. We need to look at things like Minneapolis has looked at and has now eliminated single-family zoning. Hear me, Alec?
I heard that.
Okay. And also in Portland, which has declared an emergency because of the homeless situation in that city. That enabled them to get additional monies to bring toward the housing problem in Portland. And we need to get the federal government back involved in housing. It's been 15-20 years since we've seen a substantial amount of money come from the federal government to help nationally at this level. So I thank you, and I look forward to working with many of you in the future.
I only have one correction. Of all the things Rose said, only one very minor, well, just one correction, because I'm obligated to say this from the heart, is she mentioned that the BRI was honored this past July of last year, and not only was I cited, but also our president, Vinnie Butarelli. And it was, I have to say, I had never been honored before, and I had the pleasure and privilege of having all my staff at the table. Vinnie and his lovely wife, I had my wife Margaret, my daughter Emily, and I had the staff. The Fingers were there, Ken Finger and Dorothy Finger were there, and maybe some of you also were in the audience. The Durestas were kind enough to attend and support it. And I had never been honored before, and of course with my with my lymphoma, I was bald as an eagle. I was doing my best Kojak impression. But I just wanted to, for the record, say that both Vinny and I and the rest of us had a really great time, and it was the first time I was ever honored for anything. So, and it was a very happy high point for me with family and staff and friends at the table. I'm going to call on Jeff Handley to introduce our final speaker, and then we'll take questions after Alec speaks. So I'll call on Jeff Handley to do the intro for Alec.
Thank you, Albert. I'm really happy to introduce our next panel member. He is a longtime member of the Building and Realty Institute, and he is most definitely a friend of our organization. He is Alec Roberts, the Executive Director of Community Housing Innovations, which is based in White Plains and which is known as CHI. As Executive Director of CHI, since its inception, Alec has overseen the acquisition of 500 houses and apartments in Westchester, Dutchess, Orange, Nassau, and Suffolk counties. CHI's current annual budget is $30 million. CHI was recognized as one of the nation's fastest growing housing nonprofits in 2002 by the consulting firm of McKinsey & Company. Impressive stuff, Alec. Absolutely. Alex co-founded CHI in 1991 after spending nearly 20 years as a television news correspondent. He was a reporter and anchor for WVIR-TV in Charlottesville, Virginia, WRGB-TV in Albany, and WPIX-TV, Channel 11, here in the New York metro area. He won numerous awards for his reporting, including 2 Emmy nominations and the Associated Press Broadcasters Award for General Excellence in Individual Reporting. After covering the welfare hotel scandals in the late 1980s in New York City, Alec decided to leave broadcasting for a career in affordable housing development and human services. Please welcome Alec Roberts, Executive Director, CHI.
I want to thank Albert and all of you for inviting me. And really, it was inspiring to listen to the wonderful work that Clare is doing, and Rose Noonan, who I've known for all the years since I co-founded CHI back in 1991. So it's been 28 years, believe it or not. And the problems have not improved in terms of a lot of the housing, in terms of we still have a really difficult affordable housing situation that's really gotten worse. And I thought it was really poignant for me for Rose to question, here's someone who's been involved with, the 1988 consent, the desegregation order, the recent consent decree, 5,000 units. While we have had some difficulties, differences of opinion and approach, I have to say she's one of kind of my idols. I think she's been really one of the most successful and prominent people in housing, certainly in Westchester, and the region. Has done some amazing work. So you don't have to question your success. I came at this a little from a different perspective. I was a television news reporter in the 1980s in New York City. I was at WPIX and I covered the welfare hotel scandals. And this is when homelessness was just getting started, if you can remember. There always had been people on Skid Row. There was typically single men, alcoholics, but it never, family homelessness was really almost unheard of. And then all of a sudden in the late 80s, we started seeing these welfare motels, like the Larchmont Motel, I remember way back in the 80s. And I was shocked at the time. I thought this was terrible. I mean, you had children that were living in, one room with drugs and terrible conditions. And so it kind of moved me. And I was an investigative reporter, and I knew the power of the press, and I'd been successful in getting things changed. And I really decided that this is just an outrage. And so I talked to some people in the government who I knew, and I said, who's doing things that are addressing homelessness, and what can I do? And there was a small nonprofit in Orange County that had a concept, a social services concept called family self-sufficiency. It was a different way of looking at helping the poor, so to speak. It was not this noblesse oblige or kind of attitude. It was working with the poor with contracts, with opportunity contracts, basically making commitments that we as social workers are going to help you get to where you need to go, but you've got to be the one to do it. And it was extremely successful. It was adopted nationally in like the early 1990s, and I was lucky enough to acquire the woman who developed that program. One of the women who did it, she was a social worker from New York City, so she was my first chief program officer back then. And then, I guess coming at it as a reporter, I'd always dealt with, I dealt with presidents, I dealt with crack dealers. I basically, as a reporter, especially investigative, you kind of like, or you feel that you have a little notebook that kind of protects you, that you can talk to anybody and whatever. So I kind of came at this pretty hard. So in 1991, the first county that allowed us to go in was Suffolk. That's really where we started. And I tried to doing it the normal way, which is to try to do a homeless shelter, and got run out of town, basically. I mean, you ask a community to establish a homeless shelter, you can imagine what the reaction is. And then I said, well, you know what? Screw them. Basically, this is really needed. This is a matter of life and death. This is a matter of people's, women with children with no place to go. So I invented a new model called the supervised welfare motel, in effect. And I got the county to back me, and I basically went to some motel owners and kind of made them an offer they couldn't refuse. I basically said to them, you're going to give me 20 rooms, I'm going to pay you 40% less than you're getting right now, but you're going to know that you're going to get these rooms and these are going to be filled. And we're going to have a social worker here, and we're going to have the health department. We're going to make sure that you're going to provide clean towels, and there's going to be decent stuff here, and we're going to have rules. And basically within a year, a television news reporter with very little experience became the largest provider of housing for the homeless on Long Island. But that wasn't really what I was aimed at, because I don't really believe in shelters, which is kind of funny, because I'll tell you why that is funny. But what I believed in is a concept that Westhab actually had pioneered here in Westchester, and it was the scattered site emergency housing program. Basically, most of these mothers with children, these families, can do perfectly fine in an apartment on their own. They just need some help. They need some help in getting the resumes out, to get a job or to get childcare or finding a permanent house. So, and it's a lot less expensive than shelters. So that was always my idea. So that even we had 4 motels going at one time in Suffolk. My aim was always to put myself out of business and to do the scattered site emergency housing apartment program, which we eventually did in 1995. I was able to close the hotels, and we were doing scattered site, but the problem kept growing and growing and growing, and it just wasn't enough. So we had to go back into doing the shelters, and now, believe it or not, I must have 40 shelters in 5 counties: Westchester, Nassau, Suffolk, Dutchess, and Orange counties, with 1,000 beds, talking for families. So I questioned, myself. This was not what I wanted. I wanted to solve the problem, and do development. And I realized that the problem is a supply and demand problem. What's happening now is the exact opposite direction that I had hoped that we would be going in. I believe there's too much regulation in the housing. That's the cause. And basically what the government is doing now, especially with the new renewal of the rent laws, is they're making landlords pay for the ills or the sins of the land use regulations. They're not allowing stuff to be built, so they're just going to, and they're blaming it on the, you know, the landlords. And I've never yet met an economist who says that rent controls work. And I've never heard of an emergency that's lasted for 45 years either. So so let me just tell you a little bit more about CHI. So you know that we have, as I said, we have shelters throughout the region, including 90 apartments, emergency housing apartments in Westchester and Mount Vernon and New Rochelle. And we provide all of the services and housing to these families that are really experiencing tremendous trauma. And it's just getting worse because, as you know, the quote affordable housing that's being built is not reaching the people that I see. You know, they can't. They're making $30,000, $40,000 a year. There's no way that they can afford an affordable apartment. Just so to give you an idea, affordable apartments. We hear about all these big projects, low-income housing tax credits. Just to give you an idea, a one-bedroom apartment in one of these complexes is about $1,400 a month. Believe it or not, that's only $54 less than the fair market rent. And by the way, it's costing $400,000 to produce. If you look at the most recent projects in Westchester, each one of those apartments is costing the taxpayers $400,000, of which only $100,000 can be a private mortgage. So in effect, the soft money, the grants, the the soft loans are $300,000 to produce one unit of housing that's not really it's just a few bucks less than the fair market rent. I have an answer to this now that I've been promoting, and Enterprise recently published something on it, which, you know, if we want to get into it, we can do it later. But I do want to talk about what we provide, besides the homeless housing, which is done by contract with the county of Westchester and the other counties. We also are one of the largest providers of down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. We have allowed 750 home buyers to purchase their first homes in the last 20 years. We've administered $17 million in New York State Affordable Housing Corporation and so-called home money, federal monies. So we provide literally to hundreds of first-time home buyers. We give them counseling, and we also give them $25,000 grants. So if you have any employees that are looking to become homeowners, we're happy. We will be happy to. I'll give you my card, and I'll give you our website so you can do that. So we give out about 40 grants of $25,000 a year. We get about $1.4 million in down payment assistance from New York State. So that's a key part, because a home is transformational, basically, to people. It gives people a stake in the community. It gives them an asset that they can use in retirement or for whatever they want to do. It's extremely important. And the other big thing that we do right now is we address the foreclosure crisis. Especially, it's gotten better now, but we've done over 300 loan modifications, and we do it free. We're subsidized by the state, and that also is a very difficult experience. You know, we have people coming in crying and whatever. It's a terrible situation, and that gives me a lot of pleasure. You know, that we can help. You know, we've helped so many people keep their homes through the loan modifications. My extracurricular activities, which is to try to address the problem. As I said, my view is a little nuanced. A lot of my colleagues who I work with, they're very pro rent control. They want to, control everything. They want to expand it. They want to get rid of MCIs. They want to get rid of the 20% vacancy bonuses, and that's what's happening. It's being pushed on by a wave. But I've done studies. I had a study that was published in the New York Times and Newsday, on the front page of the Journal News, basically showing that the 25 to 34-year-olds have just exited, Westchester. Basically, in the most exclusive areas, they've lost up to 50% of that population because they can't afford it. And also, they're not interested. A lot of them are going to New York City. Four of them will share an apartment just to be there. So I've been really pushing. I was a fan of the consent decree because I felt it was a way of knocking down some of the barriers to the exclusionary zoning and the impossible hoops that developers have to jump through to get approvals. And they're just, and I'm still, trying to figure out how best to address that. Actually, I have a meeting in 2 weeks with the HUD regional director in New York, so we're going to sit down because they also, believe it or not, the Trump administration, they get it on the exclusionary zoning side. They know that the primary reason for the lack of affordable housing is the rules and too much regulation. And I'm hoping that maybe we can, figure out some ways to open up the builders, to allow builders to build to the market. That's still a market-based society, I think. As I said, these are the main things that CHI does. I was co-founder of the Westchester Workforce Housing Coalition, and we have been trying to keep affordable housing on the radar and in the hearts of the local communities, which control, after all, control zoning. And that's about it.
So now it's about 7:45. We'll open it up for some questions. Silvio, just identify yourself.
Silvio Solar, I think I know some of the people here, especially Bob Roberts. Many years ago, there were wonderful programs that community organizations like yourselves had, where a landlord who had a 2 to 4 family house, that's what we're looking for, with many rooms and many bathrooms, where they would make a deal with the landlord. They would come in, help the landlord get up to code, pay for some of the repairs, then sign a lease with the landlord, where the landlord would just get a check in the mail. He wouldn't have to worry about going there to doing the snow and taking out the garbage. And if the tenants did any kind of damage, the organization would take care of it. It was wonderful programs. I took advantage of it. Do those programs still exist?
You can use the table mic.
Okay. What you describe is the emergency housing apartment program, which is exactly that. And that we have, as I said, we have 90 apartments in Mount Vernon and in New Rochelle. The difference is that when you were talking about it, they used to have what's called a property improvement amount, so that you get a market rent, and you would get every month a portion of the cost that you incurred for doing the renovation, up to 50% of the cost. So it was a great deal for the landlords. It was not permanent housing. It was emergency housing, which is what we have. But it was a great program. They eliminated it, unfortunately, that property improvement part. They still are renting, as I say, we're still renting apartments at typically a Section 8 level rent, which is a fair market rent.
Okay, my other question is, would you take over a whole house and manage it? You don't have to worry about the snow and the damage that's done by tenants. You would still take care of that. Am I correct, or no? Is that to be the landlord's responsibility?
That's a very good question. And it's a good question because I have a little bit more perspective because I'm in 5 counties. And the answer is they wouldn't do it in Suffolk, because the answer is yes, if they were willing to do it. And we do that. We have probably 20 houses, large houses, in Suffolk County, in which we have 5 families living in that single family house with all the social services, caseworkers, and whatever, emergency housing. But they don't do that in Westchester. Basically, it would be too expensive to put one family in one house typically. But the answer is yes. I mean, they would do that if they allowed it. In Suffolk County, they do allow it. In Nassau County, we have a couple of houses like that. But unfortunately, not in Westchester. I've been trying to get them to do that, but they're afraid. They're not going to do it.
Any other questions? Jerry Julian.
With respect, I guess, to like the rent laws that are expiring and the push for the progressives and the left to kind of crimp down on the landlords with more regulations, which, as you pointed out, is not the way to address affordability, but maybe to loosen regulations. How much of that effort has been lobbied up to the state level? I know you said the Trump administration gets it, but you know, in our efforts to kind of educate these socialists, I mean progressives, in how to create affordable housing, how much has it been done? Has it been something that's been talked about, et cetera?
Oh, okay. The long and the short of it is the people that I work with, the advocates, they're on the wrong side. I'm in the minority. We had a round table with top leaders in New York City of not-for-profits and housing and developers, and we developed a white paper on addressing these issues. Fortunately, I was able to write the part on suburban zoning, and I proposed an idea that I did get published. And to make a long story short, the idea is to pay existing landlords, instead of spending $400,000 to produce a one-bedroom apartment that's $54 a month less, it's much cheaper to go into the existing market and go to a landlord and basically say, we'll give you a check for $60,000, but we want you to lower the rent to $300 or $400, but by $300 or $400 for the next 30 years. And a lot of owners would do that. And it will be controlled for people making less than $50,000 a year or whatever. So you've just created an affordable unit for $70,000 instead of $300. And you don't have to ask for approvals, and you don't have to put it in the worst area of Mount Vernon. You can put it anywhere, and basically you can achieve what I think we all believe we want to achieve. I think we have a very unfair society in the sense that even though the state says that every community has to provide its fair share, they don't. They just don't. And we know that. And you look at the school system, it's really amazing. Like you go to any of these, some of these schools like Scarsdale or Bedford, and the percent of, say, students that need a reduced price lunch is like 1%, sometimes 0. And that's not really what we're all about. So I have favored an approach of saying, it says in the law you're supposed to provide it. So it's up to you to provide. It's not up to me to go propose a place to do it and then you tell me 57 reasons why that's a bad place to do it, because that's what happens. And that's one of the areas that Rose, I think, has been very successful because she works with this. She tries, and she'll work with the community. I'm not as patient, I guess. It's 28 years, but.
No, I just want to add something to on the rent stabilization laws. So forth. Alec is 100% accurate in saying that he's in the minority in terms of housing advocates on that issue. But most of them come from the perspective is we got to keep those rents low because none of the people who we assist can afford any of the rents. And I listened to Albert, describe the sort of ripple effect of what happens when you put on those various requirements. I don't think there's enough discussion between those, the far left in the housing advocacy groups and what you're working on so that they understand it better. And, I know that, I know there was hearings today, I think in Yonkers, on it.
Oh, that was actually Shelley Mayer's function, but that was postponed.
Oh, it was postponed. Okay, but I think she really wants to hear both sides of it, and I had an opportunity to meet with her, and hopefully I did give her both sides of it. But I think we as housing advocates need to reach out more to people like yourselves to understand it better.
Any other questions? Jean and then Jane.
Hi. I'm a physicist mathematician, and I've been studying this problem using modeling. And as you said correctly, it makes no sense. And yet, what I don't understand, fundamentally don't get, is why is the opposite side so vehemently confident that their approach is correct? That we should be burdening landlords with this yoke. I don't understand their position. Can you educate me?
There is a simple answer, believe it or not. Votes from politicians can count votes.
You want to do that?
It's up to you. I have had many conversations, and I'm a data person. I'm the same way. Basically, they kind of feel that it's more important that people be stabilized in their homes than landlords. You know, it's easy for them to say, "Oh, they make plenty of money," and blah blah blah. I just don't think it's. I don't think it's correct. I don't think it's just. One aspect a few years ago, we're landlords too, by the way. You know, as a not-for-profit, and I've been finding it more and more difficult the last few years to get my tenants to pay. I think we had a loss a couple of years ago of $1 million. You know, mainly in our operations, and I blew up. There was one tenant in Yonkers who did 9 orders to show cause, which were completely bogus. And this was a tenant, by the way, who had a good job and could have afforded to pay, but it cost us $20,000 to evict her. And I said, "What the hell is going on here? I don't understand it." And then I understand it, and I looked into it, and the answer is pretty simple. The courts are full of perjury and fraud. That's really what it is. Basically, I looked at the poor excuse for an order to show cause. Have you ever seen these things? I mean, some of you are landlord tenant. Have you ever seen them? They're like poorly, almost look like mimeographed, and some chicken scratch that the tenant puts in there, basically saying, "I'm getting a grant from DSS," or something like that. Complete lie. Absolutely. But it was, again, kept pushing things out, and then Christmas, they don't. So the point is, if you have a system that is so rife with fraud and perjury, and some landlords, by the way, are also, they deserve to have the book thrown at them also. You know, it's not all the tenants that's the problem. But we tried. I went to Albert and I said, somebody has to be overseeing the court system. Who's overseeing the court system? Because, you know, basically, what's going on there is a lot of perjury, and nothing's being enforced. And we went to the Inspector General of New York State, and we had a call. We explained the situation and gave examples of it, and they just didn't want to touch it. Right? I mean, you tried.
That's right.
They stopped returning Albert's calls and mine, and they just didn't want to touch it. But I think that's something that you, as landlords, you should hold accountable the system, because this is the whole fundamental criminal. This is the justice system. Landlord and tenant court is the justice system. And if there's no integrity there, you're in trouble, because also the move is now every tenant is now going to get a lawyer, because the whole idea is the government realizes that they can lessen the burden of homelessness if they can delay another couple of months. If they can give a tenant a lawyer, they can delay it another couple of months. That's going to save them a lot of money. Of course, you know who it's going to cost, and that's so. I think that's might be a fertile field of endeavor for like your group to kind of explore that. Basically, saying looking at these things and seeing why this is going on.
On that point, just briefly, we have met with politicians who know how to count votes. That's another basic part of the problem. They know how to count votes. For every landlord, there are 100, 200 tenants, okay? The math is there. The math is for judges who run for election. The math is there for mayors and legislators and whatever. The people that we've met with, senators, assembly people, mayors, they don't know the system. They don't know that tenants can serve on the Rent Guidelines Board, but owners cannot. They don't know about family succession, that at least 20%, we've estimated, at least 20% of the rent-regulated apartments in Westchester, figure between 20 and 25,000. DHCR can't even give you an exact number. So 20% of that range, which is 4,000 to 5,000 units, are occupied by second and third and fourth generational householders who are earning six-figure incomes. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows that they've got their luxury cars, or they got the condo in Cape Cod or Miami or Brighton or the Jersey Shore or wherever. And for every unit, now wouldn't any municipal official, any affordable housing advocate drool over the prospect of eventually freeing up 4,000 to 5,000 additional units of affordable housing? Because for every wealthy tenant in situ of a unit like that denies the very people who should be getting, the needy tenants who should be getting the affordable housing. And nobody, I mean, politicians are like, oh, I didn't know about that. Oh, really? Oh. And either they've got blinders so they don't want to know about that, or they honestly don't know about it. And it's awfully hard to kind of bring people around. And it's going to take more than one cycle, certainly in this state, to even get some kind of cognizance of the deep-seated and pervasive problems that exist and how to tackle them. Jane, you had a question.
Yes, if I understood you correctly, you made an intriguing comment about the rent laws being an inadequate response to poor land use policy. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. Sorry. Because land use is so fraught with, it's completely uncertain, it's arbitrary. Anybody who knows, who's dealt with planning boards and village boards and zoning boards, you never know where they're coming from, and things are delayed. There's no real impetus to quickly make a decision. So this is what's causing the problem on the supply side. And one needs to only look at, I mean, someone raised the question, why would they still be asking for this when it doesn't work? I mean, you look at the worst affordable situations are in the states that have the most regulation. Hello? San Francisco, Seattle, New York. It's all these areas where they have these, these blue states that, they want to help the poor, but in the meantime, they have the worst conditions. I mean, the worst conditions and the least affordability, and the most segregation, by the way. So I guess that's what I'm saying. But landlords are a handy, scapegoat, basically, I think.
A couple more questions. We're slightly past 8, so we can take maybe a couple more questions. Anybody?
Can I change the topic somewhat? The lady in the front.
Oh, yes, you can ask Claire a question. A question, not a statement.
A question.
And not a scientific statement, because it's really about most of
Very difficult. As an educator, I was intrigued by what you were purporting, but I didn't hear the word STEM.
Right.
Are you doing any of that? And what about music and art?
Yes. We're not doing any of that. We're really focused on our adult education to get a job. We're leanly set. We have 5.5 staff members, including myself. We have 500 volunteers who help on a daily basis. And we just don't have the capacity or the resources to reach out to provide increased programming for youngsters, other than we do provide academic scholarships for some to get to their higher education goals. We do provide one-on-one counselling and tutoring for GED or particular individual problems, very much sort of one family at a time, one need at a time. But we're in a tiny little facility with a tiny little staff, and have to keep very focused on our core mission, because we would love to do so many of those things. And every time someone in the community shares an opportunity with us, so one of the volunteers is linked to the organization that does the day of science information workshops for 7th grade girls, then of course we'll reach out to all our 7th grade girls of the families that are coming to us, and we'll make it happen for 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 to be able to attend the workshop. And if a land trust has a grant and wants to provide an opportunity for a nature hike in a local preserve, we'll bend over backwards to try and make it happen so that people can have as many different opportunities as possible. But in terms of our ongoing sustained efforts, it's really to make sure that people get food when they're hungry, the basic necessities, and what skills can we help them to find work to help stabilize the family. That's really where we are.
Well, with that, I thank you all for coming out tonight, and I thank our wonderful panel for sharing with us the many good things that we